esteemed guest speakers today. Mr. Ashutosh Dhawan, Group CFO, Mankind Pharma Limited. Mr. Kedar Upadhye, CFO at Biocon Biologics Limited. Mr. Mukesh Surana, Global CFO at Granules India Limited. This session will be moderated by Pulkit Agarwal, Director at CareEdge Ratings, and D. Naveen Kumar, Associate Director at CareEdge Ratings. We will commence the session with a presentation by Pritesh Rathi, Assistant Director at CareEdge Ratings. This will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A session. In case of queries, participants are requested to key in your panel. We will take up your queries at the end of the discussion. Now, may I invite Pritesh Rathi to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mamta. Good evening to one and all. I will be taking you through the presentation. Today's key topics of discussion are as follows. Overview of the Indian pharma industry, key growth drivers in domestic and export markets, India's salient strength in US pharma ecosystem and pharma economics, dependency on China for bulk drugs and APIs, trend analysis of the severity of regulatory audit observations, key aggregated financial metrics for pharmaceutical industry, CareEdge ratings coverage of pharmaceutical industry, including rating dispersion. To set the context, we begin with a broad overview of Indian pharmaceutical industry. The Indian pharmaceutical sector commands a significant global presence, particularly in the generic segment, where it ranks as the third largest by volume and 13th by value. Over the period from FY18 to FY25, the industry encompassing both domestic and export markets demonstrated a CAGR of about 8%. This growth was driven by an 8% increase in exports and a 7% rise in the domestic market during the same period. The Indian pharma industry has grown from $35.4 billion in FY18 to about $59.8 billion in FY25 and is likely to reach about $92 billion by FY30, with expected CAGR of about 9%. Globally, Indian pharma industry has a strong footprint in the generic segment. The pharma exports and domestic market contribute almost equally to the overall Indian pharma industry. In this slide, we shall be discussing from where the major growth for the pharma industry has come during last 6 to 7 years and what will be the growth rate for next 2 to 3 years. The Indian pharmaceutical industry sustained its growth momentum in FY25, maintaining a CAGR of approximately 8% over the period FY18 to 25. During this span, the domestic market expanded by 7%, while exports recorded a CAGR of 8%. In FY25, exports saw a strong year-on-year growth of 9.5%, reaching $30.5 billion, while the domestic market grew by approximately 10%. Several factors supported the domestic market's 10% growth in FY25. The industry benefited from continued pricing power, including price revisions permitted by the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, which contributed around 5 to 5% overall growth. New product launches added a further 2.5 to 2.7%, helping sustain momentum across key therapies. Although overall volume growth remained modest, certain therapy areas such as cardiovascular, anti-diabetes, and CNS treatments maintained robust double-digit growth, driven by increasing disease burden and wider treatment access. What actually is driving the growth of pharma exports will be discussed in detail in coming slides. However, just to give an overview, when it comes to exports, CareEdge expects that increasing focus on synthesis segment, complex and specialty products, apart from easing of pricing pressures in US generics, along with brighter prospects for CRAM segment, are likely to support the growth in the medium term. Increasing access to healthcare shall also drive the higher growth in the emerging markets. Thus, overall exports, as per CareEdge, is expected to grow by about 9%. Similarly, the growth of the domestic market going forward is expected to be majorly supported by further revision of prices and increase in demand for chronic segment, thus leading the growth of about 8 to 9%. Overall, CareEdge estimates that by FY27, domestic formulations will account for approximately 49% of the total revenues, followed by formulations to regulated market as 24%, for emerging markets at 17%, and API exports contributing the remaining 10%. Now let us see what is driving domestic consumption in the next slide. Domestic pharma consumption grew at CAGR of around 7% during past 7 years and 10% during FY25, reaching to approximately $29 billion. The domestic market's 10% growth in FY25 was driven by several factors as outlined in the previous slide. Going forward, domestic pharmaceutical consumption is projected to grow steadily at a CAGR of approximately 9% over the next 2 years, reaching around $34.7 billion by FY27. This growth trajectory is expected to sustain through FY30, with the market size anticipated to touch $45.6 billion. Key growth drivers include rising healthcare awareness, increased penetration of health insurance, the growing burden of lifestyle-related diseases, and enhanced government expenditure under the Ayushman Bharat scheme. As we have discussed considerably with respect to domestic markets, now let us move forward to discuss about export markets. The exports of pharma product, both to regulated and far emerging markets, are expected to rise gradually. CareEdge expects India's pharma export to grow at around 8% during the next 2 years, that is till FY27, with major contribution coming from generic formulations. Indian pharma companies are cost competitive producers of generic formulations. Shifting global demographics, with approximately 30 to 35% of the population expected to fall within the 50 to 70 age group, combined with the rising prevalence of lifestyle-related diseases, are expected to drive sustained growth in the pharmaceutical industry. Further, with greater focus by the top 20 pharma companies of India on research and development of complex and specialty generics, CDMO, and biosimilar products are expected to drive the export growth. Now, coming to the specific reasons, CareEdge expects the growth in formulations in regulated market is expected to be driven by two primary reasons. One, the launch of new products in complex generics, specialty chemicals, and products going off patent, and abating of pricing pressure. While the growth in far emerging formulation markets is expected on account of increase in generic penetration, launch of new products, depreciating currency. However, the growth prospects are also dependent upon availability of forex reserves. Nevertheless, exploration of new markets is also expected to drive the growth of far emerging formulations by about 9%. Coming to bulk drugs, the revival of exports from China or the launch of a price war by Chinese bulk drug companies could significantly pose a downside risk for the Indian bulk drug industry, at least in the medium term. However, CareEdge expects that the shift in contract manufacturing by global pharma players and the China Plus One strategy adopted by them for sourcing bulk drugs for branded generics in the regulated markets would benefit the industry in the medium term, thus leading to growth at a CAGR of around 9% by FY27. As we understand that one of the main factors which is going to drive export growth lies in exploiting the opportunity presented by the patent expiries. Let us discuss about the same in the next slide. Patent expiry allows the generic drugs to penetrate in market. By FY26, the patented products worth $125 billion are going off patent. This provides a large opportunity to Indian generic formulation companies. Many of the Indian pharma companies are already working to develop the generic version of patented products to seize the upcoming opportunity. It is expected that the Indian pharma companies may get around $3.5 to $4 billion opportunity due to patent expiry. CareEdge has also mentioned some of the drugs which are going off patent during the current year and next 2 years, along with their current market share and the name of the Indian pharma companies aiming to exploit the opportunity. Now, continuing with the topic on exports, let's discuss the role of US market in Indian pharma exports in next slide. In this slide, we shall be discussing about the specific market which is expected to drive export growth. Across the globe, the US contributes about 40 to 45% of the pharmaceutical share, which is significantly higher. Thus, when it comes to exports, the presence in US markets play a critical role. As we can see from the bottom left pie chart, that 35% of the total export is being garnered from US market, followed by UK and South Africa. Exports showed robust growth, especially in North American market, which comprises about 44% of the India's total pharmaceutical exports. After witnessing significant pricing pressure post-COVID-19, Up to FY23, the region saw a turnaround with a growth rate of approximately 18% in FY25. Contributing factors for the same included the easing of pricing pressures, revitalization of biotech funding, the launch of specialty products, and deeper penetration in the generic market. European, African, and Asian markets reported growth rate of about 3% in FY25. Overall, exports grew by 9.5% in FY25, with regulated markets achieving a growth rate of 13% and semi-unregulated markets growing by around 3%. The right side bar chart depicts the trend in pharma exports during FY18 to FY25. During FY18, the industry has exhibited muted growth on account of some of the major reasons, such as significant regulatory headwinds faced by Indian pharma companies, and this combined with shutdown of industries in China to comply with their pollution norms, which has led to considerable shortage of key starting materials and bulk drugs. That said, formulation exports sustained their upward trajectory with robust CAGR of about 9.4% over FY18 to 25, whereas bulk drugs export grew at a comparatively moderate CAGR of around 5%. Let us now explore India's key strengths within the US pharmaceutical ecosystem. Pharmaceutical imports by the United States have grown by CAGR of 9% from calendar year 18 to calendar year 21 and by 13% from calendar year 21 to calendar year 24, reflecting the country's rising healthcare needs and growing demand for a wide range of medicines. The European Union is the largest contributor to US pharmaceutical imports, accounting for approximately 62% by value. India also plays a significant role, contributing around 6% by value, but a much larger 25 to 30% by volume. This underscores India's position as a key global supplier of affordable, low-cost generic medicines. India has also built a strong regulatory position with the highest number of US FDA-approved manufacturing facilities outside the United States, making it a trusted source for quality pharmaceutical products. This regulatory alignment has helped Indian manufacturers maintain consistent supply, especially in times of global disruptions. From a trade policy perspective, the United States imposes zero import duties on pharmaceutical products from India, while India levies a 10% duty on imports from the US. This difference in tariff structure favors Indian exports and supports its competitive pricing. In recent years, regulatory delays and frequent medicine shortages in the US have further underlined the importance of India as a reliable and difficult to replace partner in ensuring uninterrupted access to affordable medicines for American patients. In this slide, we shall see India's cost advantage in pharmaceutical operations. India offers a substantial cost advantage for pharmaceutical companies when compared to the US. The overall cost of setting up a manufacturing facility in India ranges from $50 to $80 million, significantly lower than the $150 to $200 million typically required in the US. Beyond capital investment, ongoing expenses are also far lower. Operating costs in the US are roughly twice as high, and employee cost can be up to 6 times greater than India. This disparity provides considerable savings over the long term. In terms of innovation and product development, R&D costs in the US are nearly 8 times higher than India. Clinical research shows a similar pattern. Pre-clinical trials in US cost around 5 times more, while clinical trials can be 8 to times more expensive. These wide-ranging cost benefits position India as a compelling location for pharmaceutical manufacturing, research, and clinical development. Let us now explore how this is expected to benefit India's CDMO segment. Discovery and development of a new drug is a lengthy and complex process, generally involving 10 to 15 years of time, with investment running in billions. More than ever, the innovator companies are looking for partners across the pharmaceutical value chain to encourage innovation, optimize costs, enhance efficiency, flexibility, and productivity through the various stages of drug discovery to development. Indian CRAMS players offer a complete end-to-end solution that is right from the drug discovery and preclinical studies to drug development and manufacturing. The segment has grown over time from simple molecule research and manufacturing to manufacturing of complex molecules requiring high-end research. The presence of a large talent pool, large globally accredited plants, strong adherence to intellectual property rights, efficient and reliable delivery timelines, China plus one policy, low cost and deep research acumen has made India as the preferred destination for global pharma innovators. With the advancement of the Biosecure Act in the United States, a notable shift in the global pharmaceutical outsourcing pattern is anticipated. The act is expected to drive US pharmaceutical companies to diversify their sourcing and contract development partnerships, leading to a reorientation of global supply chains. This shift is particularly relevant given the emerging restrictions on procuring services from certain biotechnology companies, primarily large China pharma players. As a result, the supply of various drugs used in the clinical trials and critical raw materials could be impacted, considering the extensive business relationships many innovator pharma companies currently maintain with Chinese firms. In this evolving landscape, Indian pharmaceutical companies, especially those operating in the CDMO and CRO segments, are well positioned to serve as strategic alternatives. Anticipating this opportunity, several Indian players have already undertaken significant capital investments over the past 2 years to expand capacity and enhance regulatory compliance. These proactive measures are beginning to yield results, with a number of listed Indian pharma companies reporting increased inquiries from global innovator firms for raw material sourcing and contract services, reflecting strong growth potential. Traditionally, the CDMO has reported growth of about 10%, forming about 10 to 15% of Indian pharmaceutical market size, that is about $5 to $7 billion. However, considering the above developments from the neutral perspective, the industry is expected to reach $6 to $9 billion, and taking an optimistic view of 18% growth rate, the industry is expected to reach $7 to $10 billion. One of the key growth drivers for the Indian pharmaceutical exports has been the consistent launch of new products in the regulated markets, particularly in the United States. The current slide presents the insights into the number of ANDA approvals granted by the US FDA to Indian pharmaceutical companies over the past 6 to 7 years. In calendar year 24, Indian pharma companies received 385 ANDA approvals, accounting for approximately 53% of the total global approvals, underscoring India's strong presence in the generics space. This momentum is supported by India's expansive regulatory compliant manufacturing base with 499 US FDA approved facilities, including 175 formulation plants and 280 API sites. India ranks second globally in terms of US FDA approved pharmaceutical manufacturing site, just behind the United States, which has 530 facilities. Europe follows with 416, while China accounts for 340. Other notable countries include Canada with 60, Japan and Switzerland 35 each, while the remaining 98 facilities spread across various other geographies. Coupled with a strong pipeline of upcoming ANDA launches and the approaching US patent cliff, India is well positioned to capitalize on the resulting opportunities and maintain a robust 9 to 10% export growth trajectory in the near to medium term. While commercialization of ANDA approval is critical, more critical factor is compliance with regulatory standards set by regulatory authorities. In next slide, let us discuss where India pharma companies stands with respect to regulatory compliances. Here we will discuss about the regulatory risk. With increasing presence in the developed markets like USA, the regulatory risk remains a critical monitorable. The COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing travel restrictions led to a significant drop in the number of inspections conducted by US FDA in calendar year 21 and calendar year 22. However, with the easing of these restrictions, there has been a resurgence in the number of inspections. The US FDA's inspection of Indian manufacturing facilities nearly doubled in calendar year 24 compared to calendar year 14. And this surge in inspections was accompanied by a rise in the supply of drugs to the US market by Indian companies. Following an inspection, the US FDA records its observations in a document known as Form 483 and communicate these findings to the entities involved. The observations fall into one of the three categories: no action initiated, voluntary action initiated, or official action initiated. Over time, there has been a decreasing trend in the issuance of official action initiated observation by the US FDA as a percentage of inspection of its approved pharmaceutical facilities in India. The number of warning letters issued by the US FDA for Indian pharma units has significantly reduced from 22 during 2019 to 12 during 2024 and 7 till May 2025. Further, it is observed that the warning letter received by the large pharma companies with turnover greater than 1,000 crore has also reduced from 9 to 1 during 19 to 25. It is found that the large pharma companies are also hedging themselves through site transfer wherever regulatory issues are present and filing of ANDA from two sites, which mitigates the regulatory risk to some extent. An analysis of warning letters issued by the US FDA to Indian pharmaceutical companies over the past few years highlights that quality lapses and documentation issues remain key areas of concern. Between 2022 and May 2025, a total of 33 warning letters were issued, with failure to maintain quality and purity emerging as the single largest cause, constituting 24%, followed closely by lack of data documentation, discipline, 21%, and lack of hygiene, 21%. While data integrity concerns, which had been a major issue in earlier years, constituted only 6% of the total observation during this period. Compliances related to lapses, 15%, and inadequate investigations of deviation, 9% also contributed to the regulatory observations. CareEdge opines that India pharma companies over the period of time have strengthened their internal regulatory standards, matching to the growing compliance needs of regulated markets. While regulatory compliance is an important factor, another important and critical factor is sourcing of raw material. India continues to rely heavily on China for bulk drugs, which we shall discuss in the next slide. Out of the total pharma imports, bulk drugs on an average contribute about 52%, while 30 to 32% is contributed by formulation and remaining is by others. Although imports of the other pharmaceutical products are well diversified across various countries, the heavy dependence on China for bulk drugs remains a significant strategic concern for the industry. The contribution of bulk drug imports from China has exhibited significant growth both in value and volume terms. In terms of value, it has increased from 69% during FY18 to 74% during FY25. Notably, the total bulk drug imports have grown at a CAGR of about 6% in terms of value during FY18 to FY25, compared to a higher CAGR of around 8% from China over the same period. The implications of such reliance on China for bulk drugs are far-reaching, particularly for life-saving drugs, where the dependency on KSM from China exceeds 50%. This situation raises legitimate concerns about the availability, cost, and uninterrupted supply of crucial medicines in India's healthcare landscape. As per CareEdge analysis, the industry's dependency on China presents several areas of concern. One of the key issues is the limited bargaining power that Indian pharmaceutical companies hold in their dealings with Chinese suppliers, making them exposed to fluctuations in raw material prices. Additionally, unforeseen global events such as the recent pandemic or geopolitical conflicts can lead to significant disruptions in the supply chain. Furthermore, there is a declining interest in the domestic bulk drug manufacturing, largely due to subdued returns on capital employed, which has restrained new investments and slowed progress towards self-sufficiency. In order to address and gradually reduce India's high import dependency on China for critical raw materials, the Government of India introduced the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme for the pharmaceutical sector. The schemes aim to encourage domestic manufacturing, enhance supply chain resilience, and promote self-reliance. While a number of companies have received approvals and initiated capacity building efforts, the sector is still in the early stages of execution, and the broader impact of the scheme on import substitution and domestic capability enhancement is expected to emerge over the medium term. Between FY26 and FY30, The Indian pharmaceutical industry is projected to grow at an average rate of approximately 9%. This growth is expected to drive increased demands for APIs, which will likely be addressed through capacity expansion supported by production-linked incentive schemes. However, despite these efforts, India's reliance on bulk drug imports from China is expected to. This slide depicts the industry aggregate of top 50 listed and unlisted pharma entities that contribute almost 85% of the Indian pharma industry. Here, we can observe clearly how the increase in operating cost has dented the profitability margins during FY23. However, with the softening of raw material prices and also freight costs, the margins have bounced back to 23.4% in FY25. Further, with growing presence in complex and specialty drugs and exploiting the opportunities presented by CRAMS, CareEdge expects the operating margins to expand by about 30 to 50 basis points by FY26. The chart on the right-hand side depicts the expected movement of operating margins for the next 2 years for the players in formulation and API segment, both of which are expected to expand by about 100 to 150 basis points. The chart on the left-hand side depicts the debt metrics of listed and unlisted pharma entities, wherein it can be observed that the balance sheets are generally low leveraged with debt to EBITDA remaining comfortable at below 1 times and interest coverage ratio healthy at over 10 times. The chart on the right-hand side presents the overall working capital days, which is expected to remain stable at about 130 to 140 days going forward. In terms of overall coverage, CARE's rated pharma portfolio comprises of over 100 companies, and in terms of market size, the same forms about 50%. The first pie chart infers that formulation entities form 75% of the total rated debt, followed by bulk drugs forming 15%. In terms of sector spread, the rated portfolio encompasses the entire value chain, that is bulk drug, formulations, CROs, CDMO, biosimilars, and others. Out of the total rated debt, 98% of the debt falls under the investment grade, which is presented in the middle pie chart. Further, 90% of the rated debt are in a higher investment grade category of A and above, while 90% of the entire portfolio is in investment grade category. Let us now take a moment to summarize the key insights shaping the Indian pharmaceutical landscape. India's pharma sector is set on a robust growth rate, with the market expected to reach $90 billion by FY30, driven by consistent 9% CAGR. The upcoming wave of global patent expirations, valued at $125 billion, opens up a significant export potential of $3.5 to $4 billion for Indian players. India continues to maintain a strategic edge globally, supported by cost competitiveness, accounting for 40% of ANDA approvals, housing the highest number of US FDA-approved facilities outside the US, and holding a strong 25 to 30% presence in the US generic markets. The CDMO segment is also gaining traction and is expected to grow at 12 to 18% CAGR, driven by patent expiries, India's manufacturing strengths, and global supply chain diversification. That said, the heavy reliance on China for active pharmaceutical ingredients, with 74% of the imports, remains a critical area of concern, reinforcing the need to build and scale domestic API production. Despite external pressures, the industry continues to demonstrate financial stability, with margins projected to expand by 30 to 50 basis points in FY26 and credit profiles remaining healthy. In summary, India stands well positioned to capitalize on global shifts and lead the next chapter of pharmaceutical growth. With this, we would come to the conclusion of the presentation, and I hand over the session to Mamta.
Thank you, Pritesh. Attendees are requested to key in their questions, which we will take up after our panel discussion. Now, may I invite Pulkit Agarwal and D. Naveen Kumar to take over the session, please. Pulkit Agarwal is director at CareEdge Ratings. He's a qualified CA and holds an MBA in finance with about 2 decades of industry experience. With extensive expertise in corporate credit analysis, he leads ratings across sectors like pharmaceutical, textiles, and metals. Naveen Kumar is Associate Director at CareEdge Ratings. He's an MBA graduate with decade and a half of industry experience in credit risk assessment and sectoral research. He has been instrumental in driving analytical insights across diverse industries, including pharmaceuticals, healthcare, defense, FMCG, and manufacturing. Over to you, Pulkit and Naveen.
Thank you, Mamta, and thank you, Pritesh, for your insightful presentation. Before we start our panel discussion, let me introduce our esteemed guest panel members for today. Our first panel speaker is Mr. Ashutosh Dhawan. Mr. Dhawan is a Group CFO of Mankind Pharma Limited. He is a qualified chartered accountant and an MBA graduate with over 3 decades of industry experience. In his current role, Mr. Dhawan leads Mankind's financial strategy and has been instrumental in key milestones, including overseeing the funding for acquisition of Bharat serums and vaccines. Recognized for his excellence, Mr. Dhawan was named as the best CFO Pharma at the India CFO Awards 2021. Very warm welcome, Mr. Dhawan.
Thank you. Thanks, Pulkit. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Our second panel speaker is Mr. Kedar Upadhye. Mr. Kedar is Chief Financial Officer of Biocon Biologics. He brings with him over 23 years of experience in global leadership roles spanning corporate finance, strategy, accounting, business finance, governance, and investor relations at leading pharma, energy, and FMCG players such as Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, PepsiCo, and Thermex. He holds an MBA from IIM Bangalore and is a qualified company secretary and a cost accountant. A very warm welcome, Mr. Kedar.
Thank you, Pulkit. Thanks.
Our third panel speaker is Mr. Mukesh Surana. Mr. Surana is a global CFO at Granules India Limited. He is a chartered accountant and a seasoned finance professional with over 2 decades of global experience. He has rich experience in finance, taxation, transformation, risk management, project management, M&As, investor relations, legal, secretarial, and IT. In the past, he has worked with reputed organizations including Agarwal Technical Fibers, Kalpataru Power Transmission, Asian Paints, SRF. He is recognized as top CFO by various bodies including Business World, CEO Insights, White Page International, Startup Lanes, and CFO India. A very warm welcome, Mr. Surana.
Thank you.
So let me start today's discussion with Mr. Dhawan. Mr. Dhawan, how do you see the growth trajectory of the domestic pharma market evolving over the next 3 to 5 years? And which therapies you expect would lead that growth? And also, how is the Indian pharma market positioned in terms of innovation versus generics in the domestic space?
Yeah, thanks, Pulkit. So there are 3 parts to this question. One is the growth trajectory over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay. So let me take a step back. If we look at the last decade, the view has been that the IPM has shown a growth of close to 11 to 12% CAGR growth. So that was the pre-COVID era. And if we reflect on the last 3 to 4 years, then the growth has come down to around 8 to 9% in the IPM. So there has been a drop of 3 to 4% over the last, if we compare it to decade to the last 5 years or so. So there are 4 broad reasons which have resulted in this drop. One is there has been a price erosion. Close to 1% has been because of the patent expiry, especially in the anti-diabetic therapy, gliptins, DPP4, SGLT2, etc., and certain heart failure drugs. So that has eroded price of the market by close to 1%. And secondly, there is a base effect as well. During the COVID, the IPM grew at a very fast rate, and the base got reset, and that has also resulted in 1% drop in the volume growth or in the overall IPM growth. And third factor is that there has been, I would say, it's more of a classification issue, because after COVID, there has been a robust growth in the modern trade hospital segment. And this data is not captured by IQVIA. The companies are reporting their primary sales growth, but somehow this is not getting reflected in the IPM growth. So that has also shaved off close to 1% from the IPM. In addition to that, over the last 3-4 years, new channels have emerged. Jan Aushadhi has increased, trade generic has also grown at a faster pace. So that has also eaten into 1% volume growth of the IPM. All put together, sum total of these four factors, they have brought down the growth from 11-12% level to the current level of 8-9%. And that's what is, we think that the view is that over the next 2-3 years, in the near future, the IPM growth is expected to be close to anywhere between 8-10%, high single digit growth. If we look at the therapeutic segments, so broadly, there are two segments, acute and chronic, and the dominance is of chronic. Chronic has outpaced the acute growth, and acute is growing somewhere close to 6-7%, whereas the chronic is showing a growth rate of 10-11%. And so these, and if you look at the top 10 therapies, so top 10 therapies are contributing approximately 85% of the IPM. And within these therapies, if we look into the growth aspect, cardio is doing very well, close to 12% growth, and the growth is driven by lipid-lowering drugs or heart failure, novel therapies. Diabetes is also showing a good trend because of GLP-1, obesity management, and there are 100 million people in India, and semaglutide is capturing the market. Oncology is also growing at a fast pace, more than 15%. That is also driven through PD-1 inhibitors with increasing awareness and penetration. That is also driving growth. Gastro is also driving growth because that's a semi-chronic therapy, and with the new prozones coming, vonoprazone, tegoprazone, etc., they are driving the growth. Gynae is another segment which is also growing at a faster pace, driven by IVF and anemia because of the late marriages, pregnancy, and these are the growth drivers. So these are some of the therapies which we are seeing that which are reflecting on the higher growth as compared to the IPM. And the third part was around the innovation in versus the generic in the domestic space. So innovation is something which I would say is not specific to pharma. We as a country need to focus on innovation because innovation is something that can bring in the exponential growth. Historically, if we see pharma, the R&D has been focused mainly around FTCs, repurposed drugs, and more on the process R&D, which was focused on the cost and scale efficiency. And there has been a reason for that because R&D in India has faced certain structural challenges, such as price control, NPPA, which is restricting the margins. Secondly, there is a lack of rigorous IP protection framework. There are a lot of spurious drugs and the spurious players who are bringing the industry to a certain degree of disrepute. And the dollar spending has been more on marketing and branding and protecting the brand rather than on the core innovation. If we see over the last few years, there has been a shift. Post-COVID especially, the focus has shifted to biosimilars, biotech platforms, the new drug delivery systems and all. And moreover, there has been a government push, as you are rightly highlighted. The PLI schemes are there. The PRIP scheme has been launched. And today, I think the portal has also been opened up so that the progress can be seen. And the government is also promoting collaboration with the academia so that more sustainable, innovative R&D can be achieved, innovation in the R&D can be achieved. We at Mankind, the R&D budget used to be in the range of 2.5% of the revenue. But this year we have increased it to closer to 3%. So it is a big jump in a single year. I would say it's not only the Mankind, but the pharma companies also, they are now, if we see more, the higher degree of R&D disclosures in the annual report and more number of patents and publications, they are being filed per 100 crore of revenue. So these are showing the increasing trend and more awareness around the R&D. So these are my 2 cents around the 3 questions which were asked. Yeah, over to you, Pulkit.
Right. So your estimate of 8 to 10% growth in IPM is also in line with what our estimates are for the Indian pharma industry. It's around 9%, which we estimate. So,
Right.
so it's at the same level. Now coming to Mr. Kedar, Mr. Kedar, there has been a lot of discussion going on with regard to the potential tariffs on the Indian pharma industry. So how prepared is the industry to deal with those tariffs, and what could be the possible immediate and long-term impacts on the profitability and the market share of the industry as a whole?
Yeah, thanks, Pulkit. I think it's a good question to debate actually, because policy, especially by some of the leading and advanced economies, is always unpredictable. Because before they, implement some of these policies, they will consider global forces, they will consider their domestic audience, they will consider their budgets and things like that. So I think it's going to be difficult for us to speculate on eventually what kind of policy environment will prevail. But in my view, I think given the resilience that Indian pharma has shown across the spectrum of therapy, across the spectrum of dosage forms and innovation, I think I do feel that we are very well prepared to deal with whatever is the eventual policy regime will come into play. We just heard from Pritesh's presentation that Indian pharma is about single digit in value terms in the US imports, but in terms of volume terms, it's often reported that India occupies more than 40% of the end US consumption, right? And that's a large one. So I think it's very appropriate to say that Indian pharma's ability to manufacture, the all kinds of dosage forms, whether oral tablets or injectables or other dosage forms, at a very affordable price, that protects, the American patients and the American healthcare systems. I think the amount of the total savings to the US healthcare system by virtue of, the generics and biosimilar drugs supplied by India is in multiples of billions of dollars. So personally, I do feel that, the US policymakers will keep this in mind, number one. Number two, I think in terms of the engagement that Indian government and Indian industry is having with the US administration, I think there is a very substantial engagement which is going on. We are trying to participate in their efforts, to increase affordability and access for the US patients. So it will be appropriate again to say that we are partners in the goal of making America healthy again. So, and that's true for all other countries as well, right? So I do believe, Pulkit, to answer your question, that eventual shape of policy that will get announced over the next several weeks will be benign and progressive in my view. And in the olden days, I remember the target given to the scientists was to assume that the price post patent expiry should be assumed to be, let's say, less than 5% of the branded price, or even 1%. And even in that case, the gross margins need to be simulated, or the engineering needs to be done in the R&D development, whereby the gross margins should still be over 50%. So I think in terms of ability to develop whether simple drugs or complex drugs, including generics and biosimilars at a very affordable price, that ability of Indian pharma is very high, Pulkit. That is number one. Number two, I think, the engagement of Indian government and US government and other governments in the world, that remains very high. So as a result of that, whatever is the eventual shape of the policy, I think the Indian pharma will be able to absorb. What you also must notice is that the import prices which are sort of registered in the US customs are based upon COGS plus margins in many cases, which is anyway affordable. So even if worst case some tariffs comes in, the effect of that on the financials will be minuscule. And given that we are highly affordable, one of the most affordable exporters to US, I think our consumers will be willing to absorb that. So firstly, I do believe that the eventual policy will be benign and progressive. And even if worst case some tariffs are announced, which anyway, as I said, we can't speculate, I think we'll be able to work around in terms of, working with our customers sort of to absorb that incremental rate. So I'll pause here and open for any additional questions.
Right. Apart from the cost, even setting up a facilities will take time in US to
No, absolutely.
fill that gap?
Absolutely. And, typically tariffs are put in to encourage domestic industry. And at least as the things stand today, the capacities for oral tablets, injectables, and other dosage forms in US is limited on the generic side. And like what you said, and earlier what Pritesh highlighted, that the economics of pharma in US versus India, if you take US as a country to compare, I think CapEx is 3x, OpEx is 2x to 6x, R&D is 8x. And clinical trial is what, 5x to 10x, right? So I think it's in the interest of US healthcare system, including patients, including payers, including prescribers, and US administration, I think, to work with us and have a benign policy environment. And if that is the goal, I think we are here to partner. Indian industry is very much there to partner. And you're right to highlight that, it takes anywhere from, 2 to 5 years to effectively set up a plan, make it operational. And with this kind of economics, eventually, the consumers will pay more prices in US. So I think, like what I said earlier, I think the US administration will consider all these aspects and then sort of carry out the subsequent work.
Right. So continuing with this discussion on tariff, let me get Mr. Surana in discussion. Mr. Surana, do you feel any kind of recalibration of global supply chains might happen in case these tariffs kick in, both in terms of formulations and APIs? You're on mute.
So I was saying, Pritesh and you and Mr. Kedar all have covered it well in terms of cost, which is prohibitive, with infrastructure, which is already there, built over the years in India, which will take several years to build in USA, human resources, skill, all of that, is will make it little prohibitive despite, tariff for at least next few years. And as Kedar was saying, India is there to partner. In fact, partner with customers, and also India can become a China plus one strategy for a lot of the consumers. So some recalibration could happen, which I think it will be a win-win situation for India.
Right. Okay. So coming back to Mr. Dhawan, Mr. Dhawan, giving fluctuation in API prices and high dependency of KSM on China and the supply disruptions that we have seen in the past, how do you see the domestic pharma companies managing the supply chain and cost structures now? Are there any significant efforts which are underway to do backward integration to reduce dependence on China?
Certainly. It's a good question that, but if we see over the last 2-3 years, what we have seen is that there has been a drop in the API prices. And if you look at the top 1,000 API index, there has been a drop of 4% in 2024 and 5% in 2023. And this dropping trend in prices is continuing this year as well. And the reason for the drop has been predominantly because of surplus capacity in China as well as in India. And the China plus one policy, which was kicked off to reduce dependency on China, is concerned. On some of the APIs, it has worked well, especially the statins and all. So the dependency has come down. But while going through your presentation, still there is a big dependency on China, especially in terms of KSMs and certain APIs and chemicals. If we look at post-COVID, so there has been emergence of two type of players. First one has been building capacities, captive capacities, which is the backward integration, more focused on ensuring sustainability of the key formulations. Like we have also built up a dedicated facility for progesterone, which is one of the largest one in the world for manufacturing dydrogesterone. And second type of players have been which are building capacity more from the commercial standpoint and taking benefit of the government push PLI schemes and all. But coming back to the cost structure and all, I would say, as Kedar has also highly rightly said, that the cost structure gets aligned, as we have seen in the recent example of AMPA, launch of AMPA. So there are 71 players, and the prices have come down from the patented product to the normal prices down by 70 to 80% since March this year. And everyone is making profit of that, so the cost gets aligned with the drop in the formulation prices, the API. So yeah, I will take a pause here, and so these are few points which I wanted to share on API.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now coming back to Mr. Kedar, with the trade uncertainty which is looming, are you seeing pharma companies considering deferment of capex investments, or instead they are doubling down on the R&D spend and going ahead with the capex?
Yeah, so the way our visibility suggests, Pulkit, is that I think companies will be able to work around this trade uncertainty, because the interesting thing in pharma, or a very important thing in pharma, is to be first or the first few to file, to get an approval, and to launch the product in respective countries, right? So just because there is uncertainty on any global macro factor, if you delay or defer your development plan, I think there is a risk that the value of that particular molecule for your enterprise can get reduced if you are coming to the market later. So I think I don't see companies being overly cautious with this, and Indian companies are diversified. See, most of this uncertainty is coming out of the US market, and as you know, many Indian companies have presence, in non-US, geographies as well. So I think companies do have a lot of presence in Russia, CIS, in Europe, in Asia Pacific, LATAM, and other parts of the world, right? So I think companies are going ahead. I don't see any cautious stance or any defensive stance in terms of holding back investment or capex or R&D, because the price of holding that investment is your ROIs, your return on investments, and your paybacks could get extended. And
Right.
in general, the feeling is that it's just a matter of few weeks or few months when the whole thing will get unraveled. So I think, which is a good thing, which means that the Indian pharma is entrepreneurial in nature. We are here to build the business trajectory over much longer term. And given the fact that in the past we have delivered very high payback ratios and return on investment, I think there is no reason to be defensive at this point of time.
Okay. I'll pause the moderated panel discussion and request Naveen to take up the questions from participants.
Yeah, thank you, Pulkit. So I was just going through various questions asked by our audience and just presenting here with aggregate of those questions. My question is to Mr. Dhawan. Mr. Dhawan, the Indian pharma industry during last 5 years have seen increase in PE players' participation, and even domestic pharma companies have been growing inorganically by acquisition. So our audience would like to understand, how do you see the scope of M&A activity within the domestic pharma market growing, and what factors would drive such consolidation?
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. So thanks, Naveen. So there are two parts to this. One is the scope of M&A activities. Yes, definitely there is a vast scope for M&A within the domestic pharma, as you have also highlighted that the domestic pharma is generating healthy cash, and the net debt to EBITDA ratio is less than 1. And most of the companies, they have a strong balance sheet, and that coupled with the cash conversion ratio of between 60 to 70%. So yes, so they are in a position to do the M&A, and the sweet spot to deploy capital can be from mid-size to a large size, given the leverage on the balance sheet which can be taken. So yes, there is a scope for M&A. However, if you look at the factors which will be driving M&A, so M&A is more driven from the capital allocation policy, and whether it should be a domestic expansion or overseas expansion. This, given the tariff and the uncertainty and all, this equation has become a bit dynamic, because there has been a shift from globalization to localization. And almost all the countries are driving the local manufacturing agenda. And so market authorization cycle has increased considerably. What used to be 1 to 2 years is now getting stretched to to 2 to 4 years cycle getting the approval. And secondly, it also depends on the availability or the attractiveness of the assets. And I think that the good assets is not is not a constraint. We have seen the recent acquisitions in the pharma space, and but the key is the valuation. And the current perception is that the assets are expensive. So in terms of availability of assets, yes, there are assets available. MNCs are exiting the branded generic space. There are good brands which are available. There are private equity investments which are also exploring exit at a time, but at the right valuation. And my perception is that given the spate of acquisitions which have taken place over the recent past 12 to 18 months, the focus is more on the integrating the acquired assets as well as extracting the value from these assets. So these are some of the factors which could drive M&A, and so hopefully in the near future there could be an increase in the M&A activity. And yeah, so these were some of the points which I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Naveen,
Dhawan.
if I may add to what Ashutosh said. See, actually, interestingly, in pharma, what we often see is that the nature of M&A could differ. I mean, there could be M&A as in a full-blown acquisition of an asset, right? There could be a tie-up also. There could be an alliance also. And pharma is very well known for this. I think the engagement in two different companies, either domestically or over international arena, could take multiple types of forms. And you often find that the molecule is developed by some company, it is manufactured by somebody else, right? And it is commercialized by the third company.
Correct.
So, because what happens is, as an enterprise, you will have strong capabilities in one area, but you might have gaps in some other area, right? So those are the gaps which you might want to fill, and subject to the capital allocation guidelines of any particular enterprise, you would take a step either to acquire a right fully or you license it, right? So pharma is a great sector where this in-licensing, out-licensing, tie-ups, alliancing, commercialization, co-development, the multiple types of routes to engage have been demonstrated in the past. And given the fact that GLP-1, oncology, and let's say diabetes, some of these chronic therapies are taking shape, and any one enterprise may not have full capabilities all across in development, manufacturing, commercialization, regulatory. You would want a partner who can fill in a particular type of capability. So I would think that companies will continue to be active. Obviously, whether they will put in capital by acquiring or they will just want to do a tie-up on a profit-sharing basis, etc., etc. Some of those could sort of change. But I think alliances in pharma are here to stay. That's why some of the industry forums, either in India or US or Europe, I mean, be it CPHI or bio, etc., etc., those are full of activity. They have always been, and in future also they will be. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is always a scope for tuck-in acquisitions. So looking into the white spaces and filling up those white spaces, as Kedar has rightly pointed out. Yeah.
Especially the strong balance sheets actually support this acquisition part also to raise additional funding and even a little bit leveraging also. It will actually not hamper the credit metrics so much.
Correct.
My next question is to Mr. Mukesh. Sir, Mukesh is not there. I think he has just left. So coming back to Mr. Kedar, Mr. Kedar, post-COVID, especially during the last 1 to 2 years, we are hearing about this likelihood of implementation of Biosecure Act and its impact and the kind of opportunities it is presents on the Indian pharma players. In the light of the same, for the biologics and CDMO segment, how are the global supply chain shifts creating new outsourcing opportunities for Indian pharma players despite geopolitical headwinds?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, Naveen, that you have asked. See, actually, what has happened is the Biosecure Act has been passed by the House of Representatives, and it is yet to be taken to the Senate, and it's yet to be converted to a law, as we're aware. And I think there is various feedbacks that one is getting. So again, one wouldn't want to speculate on a policy matter. But I think that directionally, what we hear from the administration explicitly, implicitly, as a part of multiple Senate committee hearings over the last several years, is that they would want to diversify, I think, the services and goods both. So I think that is an opportunity for Indian CDMO companies, and the Indian CDMO companies are investing in training, in hiring, in setup of infrastructure. And I think that's a good way for us to sort of capture the opportunity that will get released, whether the Biosecure Act comes or not. So I think the administration has set, I would say, sort of a direction. Whether this particular legislation will get finally enacted or not, I think there's no full clarity at this point of time. But I think the customers are become more aware about the optionalities being offered by Indian companies. And we see an increased flow of inquiries, inbound, inquiries and approaches to take the sort of engagement forward, which is quite positive. And, as I said, the investment continues. And I mean, that is another area, by the way, for Indian companies to make it good. I mean, so generics, the oral solid injectables, and then biosimilars, and then now CDMO. So I think a multi-pronged sort of growth trajectory is being offered by the Indian companies, and that's a quite a happy thing to note.
So, do you have any figure in your mind that the growth will be around this range, maybe 10 to 12%, 12 to 13%, or something like that? Because in our presentation, in our presentation, we projected that now, considering the past performance, the growth will be around 12 to 18%. So, what is your view on that?
No, I do agree. See, both the lower end or the higher end, both are interesting, these things, because I think the growth depends upon the base, and the base is low, right, today. I think, especially with compared to the opportunity that is there, both for biopharma or for other CDMO kind of an outsourcing, I continue to believe that the opportunity is high. Now, eventually, where does it end up with depends upon the base of each company and the overall sector. So I again wouldn't want to speculate on that, but opportunity is large. We have established our capabilities, and we do enjoy very high customer recall in this area. And there are multiple aspects, by the way. I think the GLP-1, the research and manufacturing, is a very interesting opportunity that may come up. Biosimilar is a different set of opportunity. So eventually, which area do we service our clients, that will get demonstrated by activities of various companies in the subsequent years. But yes, I do believe that those numbers can work out actually in reality.
Yeah. My next question is also again to Mr. Kedar itself. There's something like something which has been more pronounced and more prevalent nowadays, is that with respect to ESG, especially for the pharma companies. In this context, our audience are interested to know how well are the Indian pharma companies are aligned with the global ESG standards, and how critical is this alignment in forging the long-term partnerships with the leading global pharma players?
Yeah, see, ESG is a very, very serious matter. And, I have been part of, now this is my third pharma stint in India. I think all three companies had a very serious board program. There was a very strong CEO level oversight as well. And, there was a commitment. There was a genuine, authentic commitment to ESG efforts. And it was not only about like getting some rank in some survey or some index, but companies have invested quite a lot in E, S, and G. And internally, through multiple set of initiatives, programs, tracking, active conversation with the board, say on a quarter to quarter basis, I think there's a very strong commitment. And pharma is about sustainability, right? Pharma is healthcare. Healthcare is about sustainability. So I think ESG is very core to pharma, actually. So ESG is business itself. I would say actually in terms of, the way we think of business, the way we run business, ESG is very core. And again, as I said, it's not about to meet some numbers. It's not about to sort of deliver on some KPIs or anything like that. I think ESG is part of the core purpose of pharma. And be it sort of setting up dedicated teams, be it committing financial resources, and being very serious and authentic about it at the topmost levels. I think ESG is a very serious agenda, and companies, in my view, are doing good justice to this agenda. There could be always more that you can do, but as you know, I think there is API, there is bulk drugs, and there is chemicals. So I think there is that aspect that you would want to be on the right side of law. Obviously, you would want to be seen as a very responsible corporate citizen. So ESG plays really very well, and it goes hand in hand. You don't have to do anything extra. ESG is embedded as a purpose, as a philosophy in anything that pharma companies do. At least that's my experience.
Thank you, sir. One final common question to both the panelists here. If you were to highlight one key strategic shift Indian pharma players need to make to sustain leadership in the domestic market and enhance their presence in the global market, what would be that? I request Ashutosh to please comment on this.
So in terms of the key strategic shift, I think we need to focus on the specialty and the novel areas. Ultimately, with the maturity, we need to move up the value chain, either by making investments in the R&D platform, if that is not feasible, or to go for an acquisition in an early stage biotech company or which is developing new generation drugs. But the bottom line is that we have to go up the value chain. We have to be progressive in the value chain, and ultimately we have to move away from the pure generic to strong branded generic and move up the value chain to be from the ANDAs to, like, the companies are moving away from ANDAs to Para 4 filing to specialty pharma and now to the NDAs. So R&D is something where we need to focus on, and because that's going to drive the exponential growth going forward. So that's what my take is on the key strategic area. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I would add to that as well. See, I think this is an unfortunate thing that beyond the age of 35, I think the prevalence of chronic diseases is very, very high, and because of a variety of things, including stress or diet or other parts of our lifestyle. And, so whether those are cardiometabolic disorders, diabetes, oncology, derma, I think the prevalence is very high. And the way cutting edge research is going on, and GLP-1 is only one demonstration of that cutting edge research, right? But globally, the way the cutting edge research is going on, and companies and research institutes are coming up with different types and ways to address this, I think we should be in the forefront, because I think our capabilities in biosimilar, generics, chemical synthesis is next to none, actually. We are globally the best in that, right? So I think I would sort of feel that there is an opportunity for Indian companies to be right in the forefront of cutting edge research and expand. And many players are doing that, by the way. Many players are doing that. We are conscious of the fact that innovation is the name of the game in the subsequent years. And let's say be it checkpoint inhibitors in oncology, biosimilars, or again, GLP-1 or other therapies. I think there's a great opportunity for us to make it big, be in the forefront, and drive the innovation. Because access and affordability we are masters. As I said, we are next to none globally, right? So that our stamp is established. And there have been many efforts on specialty, etc., etc. And that's very encouraging. So I think Indian companies are conscious of this agenda and driving it fully. There will be aspects of capital allocation. There will be aspects of a little bit of extended gestation period on return on investment. But eventually, I think the core purpose and the financial goals and the shareholder value, all this will come together, is my view. So I would probably say that is something that Indian companies should do.
Great, sir. Sir, you were speaking about the innovation part and the capital allocation and about the discovery part and all. I just wanted to know, I said that to this last question. How do you see this digitalization and the AI in the drug discovery, the automation, how it is shaping up, and the competitiveness of the Indian pharma? Can you please give a little bit of what is the color on this particular thing, both for the generics and innovator segments?
Yeah, see, what is happening is digitalization, and whether ML or AI or whatever, blockchain or what kind of tool that you can think of, is first being deployed to target efficiency. Okay, so making things better. is how it's being targeted. And the areas could be in operations, in regulatory, in R&D, okay, and in supply chain. I think those are the prominent areas, apart from some work on robotics in finance, in recruitment and things like that. The meat or whatever, the real, core business in terms of reducing the development cycle, let's say by half. So those kind of big and audacious goals, I think companies are trying to see what is the proof of concept first, and then they will invest. So I think that's always, there are two tracks. One track is, efficiency, speed, optimization, and cost savings. That is one track. And second track is really hitting the fundamental of development and manufacturing and commercialization. That is second track. I would say the second track is slightly slow because companies are trying to get the proof of concept. The investment is pretty large. So I think, but both tracks are on. There's a very large debate in every board, every forum internally. Initial commitments have started. So I think that's how I would put the whole issue.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Now I would hand over this to Mamta. Mamta.
Thank you, Pulkit and Naveen, for moderating the session, and Pritesh for your presentation. Once again, thanking all our guest speakers for their insightful views. It was a privilege to host you. And lastly, thank you to all the participants for taking the time out and being a part of this CareEdge webinar. For any further queries, feedback, or suggestions, please write to us in the feedback mail. Goodbye for now. Requesting the tech team to kindly log off.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to CareEdge and thank you to the audience for
Thanks.
inviting. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.